We are continuing our series called Multiply, looking at our theme for 2026, this one word that we're hoping will inspire us and motivate us as we head into this new year. And we talked about how this began with the idea that this is nothing new. This is simply a continuation of what God created us for. We were made to multiply. All the way back in Genesis, God said, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Take the good things that I have given you. Take these raw materials that I've provided and use them for good, to bring blessing to the world." And last week we looked at how Jesus begins to redefine what multiplication looks like. And he says that we should go and make disciples. We should go and invite people into a relationship with us, and then we should walk through our lives, and we should invite them to follow us as we follow Jesus. Jesus left his disciples with that mission: go and make disciples. And now as Americans and as people from the Western world, we have become increasingly individualistic. Our culture, not the whole world isn't like this. Many cultures, you live in the same community and you kind of surround yourself with the same family, and your family all moves and they lives close together, but we've become more and more individualistic. In fact, we look at it as like if somebody stays close to their parents, it's kind of like it's a bad thing. It's like, oh, that's weird. You should leave and go away for college. You should get away from all these connections. You should break off those old friendships and start fresh. And we like to hit the reset button on our life. Anytime something bad happens, we go, well, I just have to move to a new city and start over again. Because we love stories of lone rangers. We love stories of the hero who rises out from nothing. All the odds are against him, and he doesn't need anyone's help. He doesn't need anybody's guidance. He doesn't need anything from anyone, but he rises up and he conquers and he wins. We love those stories. And so when we hear someone tell us, go and make disciples, there's sort of this natural response for us to clench our fists, white knuckle, I got this. I'm going to change the world. Today, everything's going to be different in my life, and I don't need anybody else. I don't need any help. I can do this. But that's not what Jesus was all about. He wasn't calling us to go out and try to be a bunch of islands in an ocean. He called us to make communities. In fact, if you go back to the night before his crucifixion, before he died, his last meal with his disciples, he made this kind of shocking statement. He said, "I have a new command for you." And that's a pretty daring thing for someone to say, even somebody who has said the things that Jesus has said. Okay, he's claimed to be God. He's claimed to be one with the Father. But to say, "I have a new command for you," he's saying there's a new law. I have a law. You have those 611. You have the old covenant. Well, here's the new covenant, the covenant in my blood. And this new command I give to you, it says in John 13, is to love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus' plan for remaking this world, Jesus' plan for his followers is not that he's sending out a bunch of individuals into the world who are going to effort really hard to change the world, but that he's sending out a community of people who will love one another. Because there's something here that I want to tell you. There's a key truth here. You cannot one another yourself. Did you know that? You cannot love one another yourself. You cannot provide for one another yourself. You cannot carry others' burdens yourself if your burdens are the only ones there to carry. Disciple making, being a disciple of Jesus, calls us into community. You cannot be a disciple in isolation It requires community because the law of Jesus is to be in relationship. And he says that when you are and when you love people the way he loved you, the world will see it. The world will see it and they'll be changed by it. It will light up the world. It will change things. They can't deny your love. When you live like Jesus in community, the world sees. Because here's the thing, it's a lot easier to live like Jesus all by yourself. And I'm sure, listen, it would have been easier for Jesus to do his thing all by himself. Do you really think that he enjoyed every time he had to stop and explain things to Peter? Every time he would preach a message and Peter would go, what are you talking about, Jesus? Every time he'd try to teach them something and Peter would do the exact opposite of the thing he just showed them. I'm sure Jesus thought, like anyone who's ever tried to train someone in their job, it would be easier for me to just do this myself. And yet he chose community. He chose to walk with those 12 people. He chose to invite them into his life. He could have done it without them, but he wanted to partner with them. And so if you're going to be a Jesus follower, you are following him into relationship. But here's the thing, Jesus called them into relationship, but he didn't give them a list of do's and don'ts for what that looked like. He just said, follow me. He didn't give them a checklist of here's how you start a church. He didn't say, here's the kind of community I want you to be. He just said, gather in a community and follow me, and then he left. So his disciples did the only thing that made sense. They just kept following the Jesus way. They just kept doing life the way Jesus would have done it, and the church began to form around this group of people who loved one another and were trying to live the Jesus way. This group of people, this community that was trying to orient their lives around the call of Jesus. So if week 1 reminded us that we were made to multiply, and week 2 redefined multiplication as disciple making, then today what I want us to see is the environment in which multiplication happens. The community in which multiplication happens. Because we can't multiply alone. Have you ever tried to multiply by 1? What do you get? The same number. The same number you started with. So when we try to do it all by ourselves, nothing happens. And I think in so many of our lives, we want multiplication, but we're trying to do it all by ourselves. And we're multiplying by 1. So this morning, let's turn to Acts chapter 2, the birth of the church, and let's see what this community of people began to orient their lives around. What a group of people who didn't have a checklist did when they said, well, we just have to follow Jesus. We're just going to do things the Jesus way. And I want to start by saying that this list that we're about to look at, Jesus didn't send this down from heaven. This is not the exhaustive list of what has to happen in church. This is not all the things that a church has to do, but this is what a community of people who live like Jesus lived, this is the natural outpouring of that. They didn't have a model. They didn't get to look at the mega church down the road and say, well, let's just do what they're doing. Let's just copy their model onto our church and hope we grow too. They just gathered together and say, let's follow Jesus. And verse 42 of Acts chapter 2 begins like this. They devoted themselves. And I want to stop there before we go any further. If you're underlining, if you're highlighting, if you circle, that word devoted needs to have every one of those. Star it, underline it, highlight it. They were devoted. You know, we try to do the Jesus thing very half-hearted. Many of us are living our lives where we try to figure out how much can I give to Jesus and how much can I keep to myself? How much of my life do I offer to him and how much can I keep hidden from him? Can I be a great guy on Sunday when I'm at church and be a jerk at my job on Monday and somehow come to terms with that in the middle? Can I be a person who's really judgmental and harsh because sin is so wrong to my church friends, but then go out and get drunk with my work friends and justify it because I'm just having a good time? Many, many believers are trying to walk with one foot in each world. We're trying to say we follow Jesus, but we are following anything else. Anything that looks fun, anything that looks exciting. But this community, they were defined by their devotion. They were not half-hearted in their following of Jesus. They were all in. They were locked in. This was a community of fully devoted followers of Christ, people who decided this is worth everything. This might mean I lose my job. This might mean I lose my friends. This might mean I lose my livelihood and my comfort and my status, but I'm going to follow him anyway with my whole heart. We can't start to multiply until we realize it begins with devotion. God multiplies devoted people. But what are they devoted to? We're going to look at the rest of this verse. There's 4 things that are listed here. And again, this isn't a checklist. This is not some magic formula. If you just start 4 programs in your church that do these things, you're magically going to multiply. But this is the reality of what people who follow Jesus. These guys walked with Jesus every day for years. And they said, if we're going to look like him, this is what we'll do. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. So the first thing they were devoted to was teaching. Why is this important? Because they realized they were works in progress. We are works in progress. We are not a finished product in our faith. And the other thing that I think we need to pull out of here is they came to Jesus before they had all the answers. They were coming to Jesus, stepping out in faith before they had all of their questions answered, so they needed to be taught. We often want to have every question answered about him before we commit to him. That's easy. If I can just know exactly how the world works and how life works and how generosity works and how my eternal destination and how's the Trinity work and what is predestination and what does that mean for my life and all these questions, if I can have all of those answers, then yes, Jesus, I'll say yes to you. But think back to when Jesus called his disciples. They were sitting in boats, and he said, follow me. They didn't ask 35 questions before they stepped out of the boat. They just got their feet wet. They just stepped out and said yes to the call. Levi was sitting in a toll booth, doing his job, making money. He was set. Jesus said, follow me, and he didn't ask him 400 questions about what that would look like for him. He just said yes, and then he learned along the way what it would require of him. As believers, we are always learners because we are not the leaders. He is. So he's constantly teaching us new things about what it means to be a follower of him. But it begins with a step of faith. It begins by just saying yes. So if you have your list of questions that you want God to answer before you say yes, he might be holding those answers back because he'd rather you just say yes and then pursue the answers with him. Ephesians 4, Paul describes what the church looks like. What teaching and learning in the church is. And he says, so Christ himself gave some to be apostles and the prophets and the evangelists and pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ, the church, may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people and their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. He gave some to be teachers and prophets. He gave the church people who can teach and lead and skill and hold accountable so that we can grow, because we are not finished products. And this world wants to lead us astray, and they want to tell us all these things. They want to tell us what our itching ears want to hear. But when we devote ourselves to teaching, when we submit ourselves to a teacher, and we're willing to be held accountable, we're willing to be challenged, we're willing to have our questions asked and answered, we grow into maturity and into the body of Christ. Being a multiplying community means we commit to be learners. The second thing that this group was committed to was fellowship. And this is one of those words that Christianese has just destroyed. We think the word fellowship just means hanging out with other Christians. That's fellowship. Those 3 minutes this morning that we said hi to each other, that's fellowship. I fellowshipped today. If I show up 5 minutes early for church and have a cup of coffee, I'm fellowshipping, and I've checked that box on my list of to-dos for the week. I came to church and I worshiped and I fellowshipped and I gave. I even prayed and read my Bible. I'm done. I don't have to do anything else until next Sunday when I start it all over. Fellowship, the word here is koinonia. It's a Greek word that means shared life. It actually means participation, mutual participation. It's a community of people that aren't just attending something together, but they're belonging together. They're doing life together. They aren't just showing up on Sunday and catching up from a week of not speaking to each other, but they're experiencing life together. And I think the key thing that we are meant to do, the key part of what koinonia, fellowship, really is described by Paul in the book of Galatians, when he says, we are called to carry each other's burdens. And in this way, we fulfill the law of Christ. Now, remember what the law of Christ was? You love one another. A new command he gave us, love one another. How do you do it? You carry each other's burdens. You live and function in community. You participate in each other's sufferings. And listen, as a community of people who are trying to do things the Jesus way, this was a non-negotiable because they had just watched Jesus carry their burdens. You see, that cross that he carried on his shoulders wasn't meant for him. It was meant for you. It was meant for them. It was meant for me. He didn't carry his cross. He carried our cross because he was a man without sin. And we read in Romans that the penalty for sin, the payment for sin, the punishment for sin is death. And instead of us having to pay that penalty, Jesus carried our burden. He carried our cross. And then he said, carry one another's burdens. Carry each other's crosses. You can't really be a lone ranger in the church because we're meant to carry each other's burdens, which means you have to be honest about your burdens. You can't do it by yourself. The reality is you can't carry your own cross. It's too heavy. Even Jesus, when he fell carrying that cross, they called someone out of the crowd, and a man named Simon picked up the cross and carried it with him. A model of what it looks like to be in community. We need each other. Because guess what? Your burdens, they are too tough to bear. There's this lie that we tell each other that God will never give you more than you can handle. That's not scriptural. God will give you a lot. This world will give you a lot. And this world will try everything it can. We have an enemy who's out to get us. And he will do whatever it takes to break you. He will put burden after burden after burden on your back, and you can't do it alone. We need each other. We need to carry each other's burdens. And you don't have to get rid of your burden to carry someone else's. Mutual burden carrying is one of the most beautiful things I ever see in the church. When I see two hurting people meet in the lobby and cry together and walk out the door arm in arm feeling better about their problems even though nothing was solved, that's the power of Jesus in our lives. That's why he called us into koinonia, into fellowship, because we need to carry each other's burdens. It's what love looks like. It looks like a man carrying a cross that wasn't meant for him. The third thing they were committed to is the breaking of bread. There's a lot of debate about what this means. What does this terminology mean? There's one school of thought that this means eating meals. It's simply getting together and they ate meals together. They tabled together. And if you remember back 2 years ago now, we did a series called Dinners with Jesus where we talk about how Jesus did his best work at a table. Jesus sat at table. There's an entire book where basically every story is Jesus eating food with someone. And Jesus loved to table with people because he knew the power of inviting people into that relationship. He knew the power of inviting someone to your table or coming to their table and the barriers that broke down to create conversation and openness and love. But there's also a term for breaking of bread, and there's another school of thought that says this is about communion. They got together and they took communion. They did the thing that Jesus did on his last night. And remember, he said, whenever you do this, remember me. I think it's both. I think the reality is it's not one or the other, it's both. This community of people, they open their homes to each other, they open their tables to each other, they open their lives to each other. And then they took the very ordinary thing that Jesus did, because Jesus could have chosen anything to represent his sacrifice. He could have chosen anything to help them remember. And he chose something that was on everyone's table at every meal. You could be the richest man in Israel, and at every meal, you would have this nice, beautifully baked loaf of bread with that like crispy crust that when you break it, it's like, let's be honest, it's Cheesecake Factory bread. Not the sourdough, it's the brown one. It's the brown one. Whenever I go to Cheesecake Factory, I say, don't bother me with that white bread. Just load up the basket with the brown bread and bring it here. If you go to Publix now, they have the brown bread in bags. They don't even bother with the sourdough. They're like, nobody wants this? Nobody wants it. I think they only provide it so you remember how good the brown bread is. Because when you run out, you take the other one and you're like, ah. Every table had bread. They had the Chardonnay. They had the best wines. It was at every meal. But if you were the poorest person in Israel, and maybe you only ate a meal once a week, that meal would probably consist of some kind of moldy bread that you found on the ground. Some leftover bread that has been out way too long that somebody threw out their window and you picked up the scraps of. And it probably consisted of, because water was harder to find than wine. Clean water was harder to find than fresh wine. Now, it might be old, it might be warm, it might be stinky, it might be that $5 Trader Joe's bottle, but it's wine, and it was at every meal. Jesus took these ordinary things, and he said, when you eat these things, remember me. So, this community of people that are trying to live like Jesus, you can't be a follower of Jesus and not pick up on the idea that he tabled with people. He ate with people. He invited people into his life and he entered into their lives. And then he told them whenever they eat, they should break this bread and they should remember him. Whenever they drink the cup, they should remember his blood and that was spilled on the cross. And so as they were fellowshipping, they'd be reminded that this is all about him. As they were talking about their weeks, as they were talking about raising kids, as they were talking about the things that were going on in their city or their community or their world, what they saw on Fox News or CNN or whatever, they would sit there and all of a sudden somebody would break bread and they'd be like, oh yeah, Jesus is in control. Hannity does not get to decide what I do tomorrow. Jesus does. The president, the leaders, the kings, the rulers, I don't submit to them. I submit to him and him alone because he gave his life for me and they did not. He took the most ordinary thing and made it sacred so that when we eat, we're reminded of him and we're reminded to shift the conversation towards him. We sit at the table and we complain, and all of a sudden we break that bread and we go, man, what do I have to be grateful for this morning? What do I have to praise God for? What are the things I need to rejoice in? The final thing that they did was they prayed. They were devoted to prayer. And listen, you could not follow Jesus very long before you realized that he loved to pray to his Father in heaven. Jesus was on his knees day and night, offering up prayers to God. Because Jesus knew where his help came from. Jesus knew that he had a source of power and life available to him, and he wanted to tap into that every day because this world was sucking the life out of him. And if he didn't tap back into that resource, if he didn't go back to that guidance, if he did not submit to the leadership of God, he would fail. And he knew we would do likewise, so he taught us to pray. And he modeled prayer for his disciples. He told them, this is how you pray. You begin by just praising God, our Father in heaven, holy is your name. God, you are so good. You should start your day like that every single day. Before you complain, before you get out of bed and you stub your toe, before something bad happens, before the kids start a fight in the kitchen, just start your day by saying, God, you are so holy. God, this is your day, not mine. We're to pray for his kingdom to come and rule in this earth as it rules in heaven. God, I want to see your kingdom come, and I know that I'm a part of that, so let me partner with you to bring your kingdom life into this world. We're to pray for our daily bread, not for more than enough. Because here's the thing, I think sometimes if God just gave us all the things we needed, we wouldn't need to pray anymore. By praying for your daily bread, you're committing to come back tomorrow and ask again. You're committing to come back in prayer and say, God, okay, you provided yesterday. I need you again. I think a lot of times why we want the abundance is because we don't want to have to waste our time praying anymore. We don't want to waste our time relying on him. If he just gives me that lottery ticket, I'll be set. I won't need to go to church anymore. He doesn't teach us to pray for abundance. He teaches us to pray for the daily bread, just enough to get by. Then he tells us to pray that God will forgive our sins. Very important. As we forgive the sins of others against us. If he's forgiven you, he has wiped your slate clean. All the times that you've rejected him, all the times that you've failed, all the times that you've stumbled. There's an old DC Talk song that I remembered this week called What If I Stumble, What If I Fall? And if you know the story of DC Talk right now, that song, if you play it and then read the headlines about what just happened with one of the lead singers of that, we got the answer. It broke my heart because I used to sing that song when I was down at the bottom, when I felt like I'd stumbled and fallen. And it's all about God will pick us up. He'll give us the grace. If he's forgiven you of all those sins, if he has wiped your slate clean, even when you didn't deserve it, why are you so angry at the person who's wronged you? He has called us to be forgivers. If you're still holding a grudge against somebody else, and I'm speaking to myself now, you need to let it go. It's time. You don't have to wait. Don't wait for the apology. Don't wait. Jesus died for you before you ever asked for it. So stop waiting and let it go. Your family, your friends, your mentors, whoever it is, let it all go. Lead us not into temptation. Do not let us be led into temptation. God, protect me because there's an evil one out there. There's an enemy trying to break me. There's an enemy trying to make me fall. So God, deliver me. Save me, because in the end, this isn't about my strength and my power and my will. It's about you protecting me. When we pray, we take our hands off of our lives and we give up control to God. That is what prayer is. It's letting go. It's surrender. And listen, a prayer-filled church is a powerful church. Because we let go and we let God lead. Listen to the results of what a church, a community of people that lives like this, what happens. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Everyone was filled with awe. All the believers were gathered together and had everything in common. Now, that does not mean they were all the same. It means they shared everything they had. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day, underline every day. This was not a Sunday to Sunday thing. This is an everyday way of life. They devoted themselves to this every day. They continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of the people. That's what it looks like when a church, a community of people, devotes their lives, orients their lives around the way of Jesus. And remember, these things were not demanded of them. There was not a checklist that they were trying to follow. This was just the natural outpouring of what a life committed to Jesus looks like. Jesus' people pray. Jesus' people break bread. Jesus' people share common life together. And Jesus' people grow and learn. And finally, we get to the multiplication of this whole thing. You might have forgotten that we're actually talking about multiplication and what that means for us. But when you look at the very end of this verse, Acts 2:47, it says, "And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Who did it? The Lord. It wasn't them. It wasn't how great they were. It wasn't how attractional they were. It wasn't their light show or their great speakers. It was God rewarding faithfulness. We are not the attraction. A faithful community of people is the soil in which God creates a fruitful crop. So what do you need to do? Do you need to sell all you have and give it to the church? Sign over the deed of your car and your house? Do you need to lay down your life literally? No, not yet. I hope not. I hope that never happens to any of us. It just begins with one step. It begins by taking a step. Peter and Andrew just had to step out of the boat. Levi just had to step out of the tax collector's booth and say yes to the call of Jesus. It's just a step. Step into community. If you are one of those people who say, I don't really need other people, I don't want to talk about my problems, I don't want to talk about the Bible, I don't want to do all that. That's too much commitment, that's too deep. Take that step. Open up your table to someone. Take that step. Invite someone to share a meal with you. Invite them into your home, that sacred place where only family comes. And most of the time, only the family that we really like. Invite a friend there. Invite a stranger there. And invite them into your sacred place, your table. Pray with someone. Just commit to pray with someone. Before you leave today, just stop someone and say, let's pray together. Carry someone's burdens. Just go talk to somebody and say, how are you doing? How can I help you walk? You know, I see you every Sunday and I just feel called to ask you what I can do. How can I be a part of your life? How can I help you? Or maybe the biggest challenge, break the wall by talking about your burdens first. Go invite someone into your problems. Be vulnerable. Most of the time when I've seen real change in my life, it's because I was honest first. And other people got invited into my problems. And then they told me, oh yeah, I struggle too. So carry each other's burdens. As we close this morning, the band is going to lead us in worship. We're going to sing another song, and it's a song that seeks to reorient our lives around the Jesus way, to help us begin that process, to take that step. And I want to invite our prayer partners this morning to come up while we sing this song, and if anybody wants to come up and begin that process, take that next step, we're going to be up here during the song to pray with you. But as we close, I just want to point forward to next week. We're going to end this series next Sunday. It's our last week of Multiply, and we're going to be looking at a story in which Jesus displays the multiplication power of his kingdom. It's the story of the feeding of the 5,000. You guys might be familiar with this, where Jesus takes a couple loaves of bread and a couple fish and feeds a crowd of thousands. But there's a key part of this story that we miss sometimes, and that's the fact that Jesus waits until someone offers what they have. Jesus could have started with nothing. We know Satan tells Jesus, you can turn rocks into bread. We've seen God bring water from a rock. Jesus had the power to do it a different way, but he waits for someone to offer what they have. And then he takes it and multiplies it so that everyone can be blessed. So we're going to look at this story. We're going to look at what it means to our lives, but we're also going to look at what it means to join the mission of God. Because I wonder if Jesus wouldn't have fed those people if nobody offered their bread and fish that day. Would his sermon have ended early and he would have just sent them home? If nobody was willing to make the audacious statement, I found a few loaves of bread and 2 fish. But what could those do for all these people? Are you willing to dream big enough to offer the small, the little things that you have to God to see him multiply it and do great things? Let's stand together. Let's worship together as we are sent out to be his hands and feet. And I want to invite my prayer partners up this morning.